Hello, scholars and saints. Glad to be with you this week. Hope that you are all doing well. So, this time I'm going to read a chapter from this book called Building Inner Strength, the Chinese Philosophy of Wang Yangming's School of Mind by Wang Jueren. I've been reading this kind of slowly, meditatively in the mornings, and it's just been really inspirational and kind of aligns with my spiritual truths. And a day or two ago, I read chapter 9, Transcending Suffering, and I just thought it would be a good chapter to read. Sorry. So, Wang Yangming was a Confucian scholar. He lived from 1472 to 1529, and he developed what is called or referred to as the School of Mind. And I kind of think of it as, or some of the ideas have to do with sincerity, discipline, balancing the material with the spiritual, studying and being on the path to sagehood, understanding that we do have the potential to connect to source, or whatever you want to call it. And this connection can happen in the day-to-day. So it emphasizes practices such as study and meditation, observation, investigation, but also wants to bring that practice into mundane tasks so that everything that you do, you're doing it with sincerity and integrity, and you are improving your character with all that you're doing, as well as mitigating suffering, where I think this chapter comes in. So let's start. And the first part of every chapter is basically an excerpt from the actual Chinese philosopher's book called Instructions for Practical Living. And this book, Building Inner Strength, is an accessible reading of it, basically in a commentary. Lu Cheng was staying at the Honglu Monastery when he suddenly received a letter from home saying that his son was seriously ill. Lu Cheng was much troubled and could not bear it. The master said, "This moment is propitious for hard work. If you let it slip, what will be the use of learning in normal times? People should temper themselves in this kind of moment." So this is from Instructions for Practical Living, Volume 1, Record of Lu Cheng. And I think that it's really interesting that, so there's this surprising news, there's this shock that disturbs the soul and sort of disrupts one's calm, gives one probably feelings of sadness and grief, maybe like preemptive mourning, thinking the worst, feeling as if, your chest has just been struck with pain. Right? The situation being his son is seriously ill. So the master's response to that is that this moment is propitious, I don't know if I'm saying that right, for hard work. I guess I could actually look that up. But it's, to me, I think that word is like favorable, I guess, or proper. Propitious? Okay, let me just look it up. Favorable. Giving or indicating a good chance of success. What is the comes from Old French or Latin. Just definitely means favorable. So for hard work. So I guess you have to think about, and of course this whole chapter is commentary on this, but just my initial thoughts. Like, you have to think about I guess the advice that, the only thing we can control is the reaction. We can't control life. We can't control, health and accidents to, we can, I guess, to some degree, but not to any absolute degree. We can't control other people, but we can control our reaction. And I don't think that the master's saying that, I don't know the complete situation. Like, you can't go home, and care for the son, or, even if this person did, maybe the trip would be long. And even when, the father gets there, maybe, he can't help heal the son. So there's this, there's probably also this panic that there's distance between them as well. So what can you do in the moment that you can control? And how can you not add suffering to the suffering that already exists, I think. It is impossible to avoid all the suffering and adverse circumstances of life. We have two choices. We can meet them in a spirit of resistance and negativism and suffer greatly and possibly collapse in the process. Or we can accept them calmly and positively, telling ourselves that since they are inevitable, it is best to face them with courage and a kind of respect. Wang Yangming instructs us in the second choice. That is, no matter under what circumstances, we should always maintain our inner freedom and use our spiritual strength to transcend all external situations. In order to better understand the terms inner freedom and spiritual strength, it is worth looking at a story from World War II. The hero of this story is the eminent Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who, following the German occupation of Austria, was imprisoned by the Nazis in the notorious Auschwitz concentration camp with his family because he was Jewish. He lost almost all his relatives in the camp. His father, mother, brother, and wife either died of suffering or directly in the gas chamber and crematorium. Everything in his life had been completely destroyed. Everything of value had been wrecked. He experienced hunger, cold, sickness, and beatings, and there was not a moment of any day when he was not under the threat of death. Nevertheless, in the midst of the despair of fatal suffering and hopelessness, Frankl stubbornly continued to live out the meaning of life while maintaining his human dignity. While his fellow sufferers were plunged into fear, paralysis, and despair, Frankl relied on his psychological background and achievements and the strength of his inner mind to discover the meaning of suffering in life, rather like finding a green shoot in permafrost. Frankl believed that no matter what the circumstances, even in the most dreadful of situations, a man still possessed a kind of indestructible spiritual freedom, which he called the final inner freedom. When you cannot alter external suffering, you may still choose the way in which you face it and accept it. You can live on like a living corpse, broken in will and suffering, and quietly slip away into death one night like an insignificant ant. Or, even in the most difficult circumstances, you can uphold courage, self-respect, and selflessness, and always maintain love, humor, and appreciation of art and nature to enable the strength of the inner mind to transcend external fate. Even if one must die, one should know how to do so with pride and not in miserable suffering. So I think this is a very deep and intense example, that not many of us will be able to relate to. But I think we can all relate to situations where we feel that our calm is deeply disturbed, and we have all of these complicated emotions. We don't know whether to be sad. We might feel a little ashamed. We might feel angry. We might feel resentful and vengeful. We might feel all of these different negative emotions and feel overwhelmed by them, and even maybe judge ourselves for having these emotions. And I think that many of us have this tendency to want to remove those feelings as quickly as we can. How do we return to the calm? Sometimes it seems impossible. I'm sure we've all had nights where our sleep was disturbed because our heart was racing and our blood pressure was rising because of stress of work or a relationship, or something that was coming up that we can't stop thinking about. And it's harmful to our physical health as well, right? Like if you can't go to sleep, then that you're not going to feel great the next day, and it's not good for the body to be under chronic or intense stress. And even more to an extreme, some people want to act on it as a way to, so I guess you can go the passive way and try to rack your brain how to get through the emotions, or you can maybe respond in an active way, maybe hurt someone else because they have hurt you, or confront someone and shout and yell, or quit your job, or do something kind of drastic through action to quickly remove it. But I think that what most Eastern spiritual traditions try to, I guess, teach or inspire us is to investigate those emotions and to learn from them. Because the goal of life, and this is something that this book has been saying, the goal of life is not to, or maybe I've been reading 5 books at the same time, so maybe it's another book, be in this utopic kind of situation where everything is circumstantially pleasing. And I guess it also depends on why you think we're here and what the purpose of life is. One idea is that we chose our struggles, or some of them at least. Everyone has free will, right? But we chose certain struggles and challenges for ourselves when we incarnated on the earth, so that we could have the experience of learning lessons, and also have the experience of the challenge of remembering who we are, connected to source, our higher self, so we can do the work of evolving and then gain what you gain from such accomplishment: self-love, self-worth, self-esteem, confidence, and kindness and compassion to other people, connection to other people because of that, because of the clarity of consciousness. And so I think that regardless of whether, that sounds fantastical or not, it's a kind of approach that keeps you from feeling overwhelmed by asking you to be curious and to look at challenges and even challenging people or challenging relationships or situations as our teachers. I think that I myself have felt triggered by, or I am triggered by certain types of people, like let's say at work or just in my day-to-day, instead of judging myself because I'm obviously not evolved to and I can get riled up so quickly, or judging whoever has triggered me because of their what they've said or their personality or whatever it is, that they should be different. Taking and shelving the shoulds and looking at, well, what wound is that hitting of what they said or what they did. And so I think that this book and certain spiritual traditions can give us some guidance. So instead of destroying the emotion somehow in some self-destructive or other destructive way, we can work through the emotions and be thankful for the situation and the opportunity to become stronger and to know ourselves more because of this very difficult situation. I mean, it's always a choice. There are going to be, no matter what, there are going to be circumstances that disturb us. So I think that if we can adopt a narrative that helps us avoid destruction and that promotes growth and well-being eventually, and improvement of character and virtue that will collectively help everyone, then why not choose the positive? I think that's my general feeling just toward religions in general and philosophies in general that give you some sort of guidelines to help you through certain situations, because whether they're true or not, if they have a utilitarian value, then why not? Like, I think I would rather risk being a fool, but living a life of faith, hope, and love. And I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying that I added philosophical, like atheistic, like I'm not saying that only religion allows that. There's, whatever your worldview is, it can be like completely secular in the sense of not religious. But I would say that all of those are either, I like the word spiritual, but I think philosophical works as well, to allow you to breathe in faith, hope, and love rather than nihilism or pessimism, where you don't think life is worth living. Like, the closer we can get to, this is kind of a beautiful universe and a beautiful world, and life is messy, and being a human being is messy, and it's chaotic, and no one can ever really reach perfection or be perfect. We're all gonna continually make mistakes no matter how evolved we are. But that is life, and that's a beautiful thing. Even if we're 80 years old and we've been practicing whatever our practice is for our lifetime, but we meet someone one day that riles us up and we think, whoa, I haven't evolved past this. But no, have gratitude, because you still have something to learn. You still have a reason to be on this earth and evolve and continue to contemplate and reflect and grow and change. In his later biography, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl gave a number of examples in order to demonstrate that suffering with dignity was entirely possible. In the midst of that senseless world of despair, he would deliberately concentrate on remembering and thinking about his wife so that he could continue to live on in love. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, not all of us have like that, solution, especially, maybe if you're in the midst of separating from love. But I think the point is, and maybe more examples could have been given, but, he has a specific example here, focusing on how can we turn to love? How can we, maybe like create the artists and creatives turning pain into a poem or a song, or, what can you create so that you can connect to others who are going through the same thing, right? Or, turning toward gratitude, not to forget about reality or the situation, or not to ignore or sort of deceive ourselves, but to at least get to a place where we can go back and reflect and use and transform the sadness or the pain or the difficult situation of abuse and violence. We can figure out how we want to orient ourselves in that, how we want to respond, to take back our power and our agency to the extent that we can. So remembering ourselves in these chaotic times, remembering who we are, I think is important. He would force his fellow sufferers to tell jokes so as to transcend and distance their predicament through a sense of humor. Another example tells how one evening after a day of hard labor, he and his fellows were resting exhausted on the ground when one of them suddenly shouted to them to go to the parade ground and watch the sunset. Frankel and his friends then watched one of the most beautiful sights on earth, the setting sun shining on the towering trees of the forest and the heavens filled with rust red and blood red clouds, the desolate gray brick huts standing silently amongst pools of muddy water that reflected the gleaming sky. After several minutes of stillness, one said to another, "How beautiful the world is." Frankel wrote, as the inner life of the prisoner tended to become more intense, he also experienced the beauty of art and nature as never before. Under their influence, he sometimes even forgot his own frightful circumstances. Writing of death, Frankel borrowed from the experience of another prisoner to express his own attitude to death. He said that this prisoner had made a contract with heaven when he arrived in the concentration camp. The contract stipulated that in exchange for his life, God would release from suffering all those whom he loved. It was not important whether or not they were his father and mother, his wife and children, or just some others. What was important was that through this kind of inner promise and resilience, there would be some meaning to his suffering. His sacrifice would be worthwhile, and his death would not be utterly senseless. It was with this dignity that Frankel accepted the suffering of 3 years in a concentration camp. He believed that this was a real inner achievement, since it not only demonstrated individual character, but the nobility and dignity of human nature as well. After the war, Frankel put his unparalleled experiences and profound thought to good use as the basis for the creation of logotherapy, a means of helping people to discover the meaning of life and to transcend its inevitable suffering. Frankel thus became a successor to Freud and Adler and founder of the Third Vienna School of Psychotherapy, achieving considerable fame and influence. Frankel's story teaches us that whatever the circumstances, man should never become the plaything of his environment, but should, through proper means, live a life of dignity and retain his inner freedom. The freedom to make his own choices. In this way, there will be no concentration camp that can confine you, or any fate that can control you. Least of all, will there be any power that can defeat you. And I think that's an interesting phrase right there. Any fate that can control you. I've been coming across this definition of authenticity that says that an authentic person is a person that can't be controlled. And I think about what that means to not be controlled. I think that we can be in that situation where we're being controlled by our ruminating thoughts when we're physically alone. And we can be controlled when we are engaging with others, when we lose our sense of self, when we kind of get taken up in the emotion of whatever the exchange is, especially if we are encountering, a manipulative person who has an intent to sort of psychologically control us. That doesn't happen a lot, but it always comes across my mind because I do a lot of research in narcissistic personality disorder, and I just think a lot about, maybe the people in my life presently or in the past who I think that, my research makes those relationships and those people make more sense. I had a conversation with my mom I can't remember when it was, last week, where I definitely lost my sense of self. I'm trying to figure out how to create boundaries that can give me some space to heal, but also in an exchange to not lose my sense of self. And it felt like we had, I don't know how long the conversation was, maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes. It felt like it was a long conversation, but we were just going back and forth and nothing was being resolved. She wants me to use her card to maybe pay some of my bills or debts, or just to help me financially. And I, so this was her side of the conversation. And I was saying, no, I don't really need to do that. I don't really want to do that. I can figure it out. It's better if I am independent financially and can figure things out on my own. I want you and Dad to spend your money on you. But she said, no, we have enough money. And so it kept being I kept, trying to politely refuse her, and she kept trying to push it on me. And I felt so defeated after the conversation because I wasn't able to, I guess, just avoid the insanity of the volleying back and forth. And from my perspective, I think that sometimes people can use the guise of financial care as financial abuse, because it is a way to control somebody or to feel in power. If you're insisting that someone else is incompetent, then that's going to destroy their self-esteem, and that might make a person who would benefit from that feel happiness. And it also, I think, can make someone feel needed. But if the reality is that, you don't, as an adult child, you don't need your parents anymore in the same way that you might have when you were, 15, that is okay. So anyway, the point of that was I felt really horrible. I felt like I had failed. I was all like, I know how to handle this. I know how to keep a sense of self in conversation. I'm going to start being more direct. I'm going to start being more firm, creating a boundary, or just not engaging, keeping myself from engaging. Because, the big recommendation for when you are dealing with someone who maybe has a personality that's high on narcissism, that if you realize that you have tried for years and years and decades, like I have, to maybe come to a resolution and be rational and explain your side, and hope that, not that you can maybe come to an agreement, but even like agree to disagree and like leave it at that. If nothing really works, you start to realize that resolution isn't the goal of the other person. And so then you have to learn how to include silence just as a pause for yourself so you don't engage, or you have to learn to, just basically disengage if they start guilting you or attacking you or whatever it is. So anyway, I feel like I'm really getting off track. I had to see it differently. I had to see, okay, I didn't like how I responded in that conversation. So that's fine. It is what it is. So what can I learn from it? How can I approach a similar situation or conversation differently next time, so that I'm not trying to avoid the conversation, or I'm not afraid of the conversation, but I can still be kind, I can still be compassionate, but I can reserve a sense of dignity. Because it's so good if you have to engage with someone who's psychologically abusive, if there's just, for whatever reason, you have to be in a relationship in some way, to be able to engage with your dignity still intact. And so I had to say, okay, like I can't feel, because I can tend to feel pathetic. I can tend to feel disappointed in myself, that I'm such a weak person that, acts like a child and is afraid and can't figure out how to improve the situation or to be strong. But that kind of self-judgment is really just going to send me off into depression and worse. So I can't do that. I have to have gratitude for it, in a sense, or I can choose to have gratitude and think of this as a teacher. Because if you have a psychologically abusive person in your life, if you have a narcissist in your life, you can learn a lot from that, because sometimes you'll find that those same tendencies in a workplace or in the government, in your country, politically, and everything we can learn from. And we're just, as long as we're on this earth, I don't think that any or many of us are going to reach a point where we no longer have to learn, where we no longer have to learn from our failures and our mistakes. We no longer have to work at relationships or work at ourselves. I just don't think that that's the point of Earth. I think the point of Earth is just to continue, and maybe we improve and certain things get easier, but the lessons just don't end. We continue throughout our lives, regardless of our age, to in a way to be a beginner at certain things. And I just think that we have to be okay with that. We can't be afraid of criticism. We can't be afraid of judgment. We can't be afraid of rejection. We can't be afraid of our own imperfection. If you're a human, then you have a mix of good and bad. And that is just the state of being a human. I don't remember where I was. Okay, as far as Lu Chang is concerned, the dangerous illness of his son was admittedly a serious blow, but seen from the point of view of self-cultivation, it may have been an opportunity to temper the will or to forge a strong inner mind, which is why Wang Yangming told him this moment is propitious. I need to look that up. The pronunciation for hard work. Where's the British lady that tells me how to say words? There is a well-known Zen saying, suffering is enlightenment, meaning that suffering is an indispensable condition of enlightenment. Without it, there is no possibility of enlightenment. I think that statement is interesting because I've definitely questioned it before. And I would love for any of you to put in the comments what you think. Is suffering necessary to enlightenment? Thinking about the Buddha, he had to leave his very comfortable, protective life that his father created for him, and he had to experience death and aging and illness in order to get to the other side, to get enlightened. But I think I would love to imagine worlds, maybe other worlds, maybe not Earth, or at least not the Earth we're living in now, maybe other worlds, other dimensions, other realms where we can continue to grow and to be enlightened and change, but not necessarily suffer, or at least not suffer so much. I don't know. What do you think? I know in my life, suffering certainly was my reason for having any kind of spiritual awakening or, moving out from under the veil of unconsciousness and having any kind of enlightenment in which helped me see things clearly, and I'm continually, I think, trying to do that. I don't know if I wouldn't have, but I didn't, I needed suffering to do that. But do you have to have it? I just don't know. His son's illness caused Lu Chang immense suffering in the same way that exile to Longcheng caused Wang Yangming's great suffering. Caused Wang Yangming great suffering, not possessive. Nevertheless, this is precisely the road to enlightenment. On the basis, we could say that a model with a positive quality cannot be separated from its negative aspects or mood. In other words, it is exactly because of the existence of negative aspects and mood that a positive model becomes possible. As Khalil Gibran said, a pearl is a temple built by pain around a grain of sand. As far as self-cultivation is concerned, neither external suffering nor internal pain are our enemies. They are indispensable refiners' fire along with the road of self-cultivation. It is precisely their existence that has created the conditions for the perfection of character and given us the possibility of changing and improving our nature. They also allow us greater possibilities to achieve successes difficult to reach under normal circumstances. Like the unavoidable setbacks and suffering of living, the world in which we exist is also full of all manner of regrets. But it is only because of these regrets that we embark on the pursuit of perfection. Despite the fact that perfection can never be realized, it is in its untiring pursuit and approach that the soul is tempered, our character improved, and our nature can escape from disaster, baseness, and corruption to freedom, nobility, and purity. So that's the end of that chapter. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know what you think of it, and I will catch you all next time.